there, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 32 with Spencer Ingram. Really cool conversation, connection made by a past podcast guest, Brian Leduc, continuing the sort of conversation that we had there about the future of work and education. And Spencer is a sort of self-proclaimed imagination advocate, sort of a really important currency for people, just to kind of expand their horizons and belief of what is possible for themselves, and also talk about a lot of the value of side hustles and hobbies, which I appreciate, and just a lot of great recommendations of stuff to check out. So definitely poke into the show notes for this episode for all that goodness, and just really appreciate Spencer's time here and all that he shared. So just strap in, and after a brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 32 with Spencer Ingram.
Hey there, listeners. It's an honor to have our good friends at SwiftKick be a sponsor of the podcast, because I've seen their work firsthand, and it's truly unlike any student leadership training I've experienced. They've been voted Best Student Leadership Program Unprecedented 5 times, so you know they must be doing something right. As a bonus for our listeners, SwiftKick is giving a $500 discount off their normal speaking fee if you mention Higher Ed Geek when you contact them. I highly recommend their trainings for your campus, as your students will be talking about it for months afterwards. It's really great stuff. Check them out, swiftkick.hq.com, to learn more, and let them know I sent you. Now, back to the show. Because I was looking at your LinkedIn, it's just a very, very interesting path. I'll be curious to hear more about in the body of the episode. But I guess, so do you just work as, I think the one time when we talked about looping method stuff, you just work out of co-working spaces usually?
Yes. So I have an office, a private office, with one of my past clients who has extra space. And then I typically work out of a bouldering gym. Yeah, it has a shared office. It's not marketed as shared office space, so it's minimal use through about midday. So it's super quiet in the morning. And I don't know about you, but co-working spaces can be quite expensive, and this place is $100. Well, it runs me $75 a month on the subscription.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, because I think it's I appreciate co-working spaces and I like them, but yeah, I think it is starting to be where it is expensive to kind of operate that real estate, because it's almost like victims of their own success, I guess, of just if they make an area more appealing and it, I don't know, just makes it more expensive because more is getting built up or something. I don't know. I feel like it could just be a weird thing where you might be oh, we're just gonna get this cheap place, but then stuff gets built around it and now it's more valuable, so then the rent goes up or something. But that's my theory. Yeah.
No, it's not the best place for taking video calls, but otherwise it works great. I mean, I can just hop down, and there's a full gym and day lockers and everything, and so I like that. It gives me a place. I found that routine's really important when you work for yourself. You've got to kind of create a day job. So I go to the office, and it changes everything versus staying at home.
Yeah, no, I could be productive to a point at home, and there's always distractions and other stuff. So yeah, it's nice to, I guess, still create that routine, go to a place and make sure you're kind of keeping yourself honest that way. So yeah, we'll go ahead and dive in here. Appreciate you making time for this episode, Spencer, and really curious to hear more about your journey, kind of what's on your mind and what you enjoy about the work that you do and kind of what you're geeking out about and stuff. So we'll get right to it. If you just want to start us off, though, with a brief introduction and kind of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. Thanks for having me. And I am Spencer Ingram, and I run a small studio that builds largely open source tools for career development. One of our leading platforms is called the Looping Method, and I'm a co-author into that. What's nice about making it open source is we have many practitioners who are co-authors now, and that's really exciting to see them adopt the tools into their special uses. Everything from college student affairs, career counselors, and into the workplace as well. So my journey started in college. I'm a first generation college student. I went to school in 2003, and I went to the engineering school. And I was super lucky to go to a great top public school, but I quickly found myself falling behind, or at least feeling like I was behind to my peers. And I was spending every night just solving problem sets and never really making anything. And I'm a big STEM maker, and it just was no imagination and burnout very quickly. So I started getting pretty depressed. And the pivotal moment came when I dropped out of college. And that changed my whole path. And I started to learn how to take responsibility for my education. And that put me on the path to everything I do today, and learning to solve problems when paths are unclear. So I did go back to school, and I completed a degree. I ended up getting a master's degree even, because I love science and technology. I have degrees in both, but I wrestled my way through higher ed to make it what I wanted it to be. And that, of course, coincided with the collapse of Lehman Brothers. And so we enter into a workforce of just crazy uncertainty and job losses. So that from that period in college and dropping out and emerging in that economy, I've spent most of my time since then building these types of tools around starting people. And that's brought me to the work I do today with these open source tools.
Very cool. Well, now I'm very curious. It segues very well to our next question of just like your college experience. So, a lot of people that listen to this and that I've interviewed, work in higher ed proper, and you work with a lot of higher ed folks, and, you have an interesting path through your own college experience and, dropping out, going back, and through all of the experiences you had, led you generally on the path you are now. But I guess digging deeper with that, what are some experiences maybe like that decision point to drop out, and then like what it was like to come back, and if you really were going about things differently? I assume you were, when you returned. I guess just talk more specifically about your college experience and what that journey was like, and what it gave you, personally and or professionally, that you still kind of use today, if it's like an anecdote or just sort of like a memorable quote or something, somebody who was influential, any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, my most valuable parts of college came from the non-academic pursuits. The school I went to the University of Virginia, and there were programs like university programs, councils, just the things to get involved in that were very student self-directed. And that's where I met my peers. Super lucky, again, to just be surrounded by these driven, smart peers. And then it was supported by, the non-faculty staff, the student affairs type staff. And I owe so much of my the value of my experience to those people. Many of them are still in higher ed and continue to do incredible work because they were looking at me through the whole person. And especially when you're leaving school, they made sure that there wasn't anything concerning, and just a lot of coaching happened. So I found that to be most valuable. And it's hard to find sometimes, in communities outside of academia, where inside academia they have dedicated roles for that job. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of, when I came back, I recognized the value of the alumni experience. The school has an incredible alumni community, super give first. We're here for whenever people need help. And that attitude and mentality, I always really respected and appreciated and wanted to be a part of. But I would say that so much of it was just community in what I gained from my college experience. But that adds up personally, my personal growth, but also professionally. And I connect regularly with alumni. It's my first point of contact for getting help.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah. And I think, I've honestly, I kind of am involved from afar with my undergrad, which was like a huge, hugely influential place for me as well. And I think, it can be tough to find ways to get involved. But I think on one hand, it's it could be on like us, and we can control our world and our lives and our actions and stuff, is like, yeah, like seeking them out and reaching out and following up and keeping in touch and that sort of thing. So I think if somebody reached out to me, I would be more than happy to help. But otherwise, it's like we all just lead, busy, full lives. And, my involvement from afar is, the occasional small donation when they're doing like a specific, drive or something. And, they had like a recent sort of like giving day and stuff. But yeah, it's great that network's been, so supportive to you. And just like nurtured that appreciation, which I think can just had continually compound in terms of just like valuing like a good coach, somebody looking out for you, somebody guiding you, somebody helping you. And that certainly, like, as we, enter into our kind of full-time career lives after school, we don't have that as much, but you just have to try to seek it out. I know that's part of the work that you're doing, is trying to help people, coach people in like a career context, like getting some of that clarity and everything. So, talk a little bit more about that. And I'll say, just so folks kind of know to look for it in the show notes, I'll include the link out to one of our previous episodes with Brian Leduc, who is a collaborator of yours, kind of for the looping method stuff that you're doing now. So, I guess talk more, like what you enjoy most about your current work, and kind of digging into that a little bit deeper, and kind of what got you into it, in terms of like actually being like, okay, this is what I'm going to like really dedicate, out of all the things that you could do, like what are you going to, like, why did you want to dedicate your full-time attention to this sort of stuff?
I love that question, of all the things you could do, because that truly is the case, right? There's so much you can do. Our awareness of what's possible is so limited, and the work that I do is often first targeted at expanding people's awareness and that confidence in what they can do. So why I do what I do and starting people, it started in 2012. And this goes back to the importance of alumni. We created a student accelerator program for college students at UVA, and that's really grown in the last 6 years to a multi-100-person student program. We have just the most incredible leadership there. We have students who have graduated and become part of the team, the staff, and it just reflects so much of what I found valuable about my undergraduate experience. But it augments the new student experience today in teaching those entrepreneurial skills, the things that I have learned since leaving school and wish I had had a place to go cultivate. So that program teaches a lot of entrepreneurial skills. We don't expect people to be entrepreneurs. We teach them about that self-directed responsibility for their learning, knowing that that's what you are going to need for the rest of your life. It's a lot about handling the new norm of uncertainty. And so what I love so much about that work, now I have students who are alumni, it's just so wonderful. And we have alumni connecting to the ongoing students. They come through Austin. I'm able to connect with them. And I get so much of a reward from that kind of legacy. But in the moment, in the practice, in the experience working with students, and even the work today, there's an aha that happens, when they see what they're capable of, when they learn how to create their own rules, when they learn what they can control in the world and like craft into the world and become problem solvers and like truly think critically. So I find that to be some of the most rewarding, and it may lead into, I'm gonna maybe get on a little soapbox here, but it leads me to the thing that I geek out so much about right now, which is a crisis of imagination. Wow. I find in the work, whether it's with students or with VP professionals in VP roles, there is a crisis of imagination. And we have a lot of problems to solve. So, if we can cultivate more of that imagination, that environment that helps show people where new ideas really come from, give them permission, and give them the tools to create, and make a mess, and mess things up. Even that's what Hackseville was so much about. And you go in there now, every wall in that house. There's 2 houses across the street from the university. That this is a independently operated organization. There are every wall, every surface is adorned with artifacts from the student experience. Students who have made things, everything from the murals to the bits and pieces and the digital and the physical. So it's all about this permission that's created and cultivating that imagination, because we are in desperate need of it.
Yeah. That's a little nugget of wisdom right there. I think everyone should take it and absorb it. Yeah, just like, because I think, my angle on it is sort of that, like, the intersection of like passions and strengths to like what we're naturally good at and what we're into. But then it's also like, you could still kind of get boxed in that way. And I think like a little sprinkle that sort of like, as a catalyst and a little, little pizzazz on there is like, yeah, like imagination. Because I think, the world wants to, put things into patterns and just like, structure it. But then it, can become like stifling. And I think, yeah, like you were saying, like sort of thinking critically and like making your own rules, which some of them can be, if you grew up a certain way and certain values or like, different things, it's just the idea that almost like you come to it on your own versus just doing it because it's this external formula. And it's just like having that sort of point of view. And I think, like you said, that's this sort of stuff where it's like, yeah, you're not trying to be like, everybody should start their own thing and try to make startups or whatever. It's just like, no, it's maybe there'll be a different term for it in the future, but it is that just like entrepreneurial mindset, and that it is something that, you can kind of be that like entrepreneur in different organizations. You don't have to be the person in charge. You can just be like, the person with imagination, likes coming up with ideas, likes building things and creating stuff. So, and I can imagine, all that stuff just being really rewarding of, kind of seeing the fruits of your labor and, students kind of paying it forward and helping each other. And, it's a beautiful thing. And I guess, you certainly geek out about that stuff, which I love. And, I guess just to add maybe then like the, like a little bit of like the personal side, like what are some of the things like personally that you like geek out about and like the things that you're into, and we'll get into any sort of like resources and other like specific stuff you might want to recommend, but like just kind of in broad strokes, like what's kind of capturing your attention right now and having you geek out about it.
Yeah, there tends to be this broad, or maybe there's a lot of conversation around the future of work. Mm-hmm. And people wanting to define what that's going to look like and predict it. And in my opinion, the future work is now, and it's day by day. This stuff is always going to change. I'm not worried about predicting that. I think there's a mindfulness and responsibility to it for sure. But, I geek out about what people are doing now, in the now, who probably don't ever talk about the future of work, but are pioneering their own paths. And that gets me so excited. I mean, this goes from the student to the professional. And, we saw this at Haxeyville, the language that we use. We always struggled over the word entrepreneurship. To your comment a moment ago about the entrepreneurial mindset or intrapreneur, we never found there isn't maybe a word for how to describe this best, but that oftentimes we found students who were extremely entrepreneurial, maybe running their Etsy shop and paying for their college tuition, but didn't think of themselves as an entrepreneur. So they were never folded into the story. Mm-hmm. So I geek out on those people. I'm a big mountain biker, so I follow a few folks on YouTube who are just average Joes and Janes that had regular, nothing special about their jobs or work that makes them any different than you and I, other than the guts that they put in to building this new pathway for themselves in what some of us, or the talking heads might say, the future of work. I'm more interested in who's on the front lines, like just creating that path. So I geek out about those people and those stories.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I guess then with those things that you geek out about, like what are ways that anything that you've been into has like positively contributed to your life? And I mean, the thing that I'm hoping for, like, I'm curious if it's happened for you is like, because I think, whether it is like movies or TV or video games or something, or just like, connecting with people. I know, like, I keep saying this to Brian when I talk about him. Like, when I met him, he's been such a great like catalyst for just like good energy. And I think, that is certainly something that I love, is just talking with people about the things that they're into, or just talking to people that have that imagination and just kind of, open to the potential of things. But I guess, like, have you, and maybe like how you met Brian, that's our shared connection, why we're here recording this podcast. But like that idea of like those affinities that you have, the things that you're geeking out about, like how have they contributed to your life? Have they brought people into your life, or how, just kind of framing it that way, I guess, of that value that these interests that you've had, have they kind of, added value to your life? Yeah.
Well, on the topic of a crisis of imagination, I'm extremely protective of my imagination. Not saying I have a good one, but I know what the enemy of imagination is, and if I'm too full of stress or just packing my time with work and not creating space for play, then I'm not protecting my imagination. And so another big thing I'm looking at, and where I geek out, is finding combinatorial ideas. So I find inspiration by combining things from other places to solve what I'm working on now. It's maybe completely unrelated. If I want to help solve for some challenges in workplace learning, I maybe don't just read books about learning and development or organizational design or behavior. I might be looking to places completely unrelated who aren't having those conversations. So I'm geeking out a little bit. Again, the YouTube's really amazing YouTube channels and creators. I love those. I love the access of that. I think that's also super key. That we live in a world now where we have this unprecedented access to tools for learning and making and sharing, and it's our responsibility to use those to elevate ourselves, to continue our learning. So I like the YouTube space. WeWork just acquired Meetup, and I love what Meetup has done. And when I go to a new city, or I moved to Austin 4 years ago, that was the place I went looking and finding my people and who I could geek out with. So that's been great. I also love taking my own medicine. So all the tools that we create around the looping method, I use on myself, and I pressure test. And one of my favorites is a volunteer hack where I find events and I just go make myself valuable there. And then you are literally given a tag, a pass to meet people. So I always love doing that one locally and making myself helpful. But you find places for those combinatorial ideas, which then create the aha moments and inspiration for new things in your work. So I maybe I'm scratching the surface there, but I don't have like maybe one thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing is the best right now. But like, it's these tools. Like, we just live in this world full of amazing tools, almost overwhelmingly so. Actually, you know what? I tell you what, I am geeking out on one tool in a big way right now, and it's called Loom, Loom. And Loom is a browser extension for creating quick videos from your browser. It's Chrome extension, and so it gives you the little head, your little video in the circle, so you can see yourself talking. You can just record over images on your screen. So it makes this a super quick and dirty tool for sending messages, a lot of use cases, but I use it for sending authentic communication to people to show them something that maybe we've never even met or talked to in the first place. Like, if I want to send a cold contact, a cold email, it's coming with a video that I made personally for you. And I found that tool to just change the way that we're communicating and not have to overthink it. So that's what I'm geeking out on for sure. I love that tool.
Yeah. Well, I can see, just like, it's a cool tool. And sometimes like I do that, I just kind of dabble with stuff and not really know like what am I going to do with this? But like you said, like if you're, just trying to do outreach and like build connections with, potential clients or collaborators or just, whoever, video and seeing someone's face talk to you is like, it's the ultimate thing. It's way more personal, and, it's not just, a fun tool to mess around with. It has that, it adds that value to your life. And, any of the other stuff, I'm totally on board of just like, being a part of the world and doing different things and meeting people and all that, like the value that adds, like any, that kind of stuff that you could get about, in my experience, and that's exactly what you said too, like, it just gives you those little sparks of inspiration because you're just like, amidst different people and just in the world. And then, you just kind of like mash things up and it's just like, oh, it's this thing with this thing, what if you put, these two things together or whatever. So it's like, it's always a good spark for inspiration, just, being amidst people who, whether they're interests that you share with them or, something completely different, you can be inspired. And, it's always, really nice that way. Well, I guess, in that spirit of recommending Loom, which that sounds like a very cool tool, anything else that, maybe a tool or just stuff that you're reading, watching, listening to, like what are you consuming lately, or just some maybe like your all-time favorite stuff, anything that you'd want to recommend that we can include in the show notes?
Sure. So I've been listening to Adam Grant's new podcast called Work Life. They come in at the half-hour mark, and then I listen to them on 1.25 speed, so they're like the perfect length. And then I've been reading Daniel Cable's new book, Alive at Work, and Daniel Cable is a social psychologist and professor of organizational behavior at the London Business School. So I really love that it's grounded in a lot of science. And how we learn, how we want to behave, what motivates us. You're going to need a little bit of like the Daniel Pink kind of style in there of the research around positive psych, which then makes me think about Sean Akers' work. I have not picked up Sean Akers' new book, Big Potential, but I'm hearing really great things about it. I absolutely love his book, The Happiness Advantage. Again, grounded in so much great research. Tied to real world case studies, and just it's a small read. It's a short book, but I've found it to be much more of a reference book where I can just go back and just read similar stories again with new frames of mind as I'm working on a different problem. I tag the pages a lot, so I just can flip through, and I find that book just be uplifting in a lot of ways, and affirming. So I love those three, especially right now. Of course, those are super centered, right, aimed at the work that I'm doing. I like Chris Guillebeau's podcast. He's been doing it now for over a year. It was the Side Hustle School. And this is a big one because I love the idea about diversifying your income. I have a lot of points of view on employee learning based on notions of a side hustle. And he gives one every day. He has a podcast, which is a case study of someone's side hustle. They have to be making a minimum of $500 a month, and sometimes many magnitudes more than that. But what I love about it is they're super short. They're like 10 minutes long, and they give you this radical awareness, right? Where you read the title of the podcast and the show notes, and you're like, how is that a thing? And that's what I love about it so much, is that then I can bring little the case studies into stories that I share, just lifted directly from there. And you just learn the wildest thing that people are doing, and it shows you how little we know about how much we limit ourselves in our own minds about what's possible for ourselves. So I think those are super cool as a great resource.
Yeah, that's all great stuff. And yeah, I can only imagine, like some of the stuff on there. Cause I mean, like in a very small way, like I just moved to Baltimore, and they have a really nice, like farmer's market and bazaar that we've gone to the past couple of weeks. And there's just all these vendors that are like, obviously selling food and, they're like farms and stuff, but then like just local artisans making soap and dog treats and like little notebooks and art and like, just all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty good definition of like a legit side hustle. Cause I think a lot of people like, which it's whatever you want to make of it, you define success for yourself, but like, you might not be making any money off of it. So, really be more of like a volunteer project or something. But then like, yeah, if you're making like $500 a month, again, like not really enough to live on, but it's like, that's a legit kind of side hustle, like, side project. And, if it's, kind of enabling people to feel, which again, you don't need that permission, but just maybe being inspired by other people that, their example is like, I did it with this thing. And, I think that's, something that's going to be really valuable, because I know a lot of people are kind of like in that mindset where like, maybe you never, again, defining success for yourself, like you would never want it to be your full-time job. And maybe it would be really hard to make it that. But if you want it to be like a legit fulfilling thing that, I would assume, a lot of people's projects, they would want to be out into the world and, consumed by people and all of that. It's like, see how other people did it, and just kind of, kind of go from there. So I think that is a very good recommendation.
I'm going to yes and that too, because they're starting from a place of, I'm going to find a side hustle in order to, make a certain income goal or quit my job. I mean, that's a challenging place to start from, as opposed to sort of stumbling onto the side hustle, going at it from a hobby perspective, and if you listen to many of the side hustle school stories, they ended up with a side hustle. They didn't set out on that mission. And so the point of sharing that is that it's reflection of reality, but it's that reality because there's an importance of exploration, and it's really, really hard to pre-design a perfect side hustle. And so I would always encourage people to just start from a place where that's not the expectation, that you will evolve what you learn to get there and probably change the nature of your side hustle in some ways. But start with just getting the consistency of the hobby moving. And that already alone, that takes so much guts. And to put something into the world is scary. So once you do that, you end up creating these pathways. And those are the pathways that the world can come and bring you serendipity. And that's where your side hustle will emerge from, the serendipitous moments, because you took this artifact, this thing you created, and you shared it with the world as your side hustle. So to me, like that's how you're going to manage this great uncertainty in the future, is by learning to become that maker and having that confidence. And that's why I say, you want to do employee learning and development programs, help them set up their Etsy store. They're not going to quit their job over the Etsy store in the near term. And if they do, they were going to quit anyways eventually, Like, wouldn't it be great if they quitted out of success of their Etsy store? They're going to credit the employer for that. Either way, that person's always got a foot out the door, and in the process of building that Etsy store, they are going to build an incredible confidence of just getting that thing into the world. They're going to learn all the skills and tactics and things that you want them to do in learning and development, but it's going to be intrinsically motivated. And it's going to be dealing with uncertainty and problem solving. They're going to seek out help. They're going to, which can come from inside your company or outside. They're going to learn to market it. Whatever the particular skills and communication, everything that's required, they package into setting up an Etsy store, or any, dozens of other examples that aren't like turning on an LMS system and reading the leadership module.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A little bit of a rant there, but you know what I mean? It's like, no wonder it's learning is so boring.
Right. Because it can be like, because like I said, I like playing with different tools, and I think some of the, side projects that I have like allow me to have a reason to use them or something, and like you can learn things. So like things will come up and be like, oh yeah, I've used that before. Well, yeah, I'm familiar with that. Just like, it could be beneficial that way. And then like, just like getting into it. And I think Brian said essentially the same thing, is just like, you can enter into certain spaces to almost just like test things in a very low risk way, because like my point of view is like, it would probably make it very not fun, and it's super stressful and very high stakes if you go into something being like, this is going to be like able to replace my full-time job. Like this is going to be like, make like, it's like this $1 million idea or something like overnight. And it's like, that is like such an exception. And that's why it's noteworthy. And there are these sort of like, stories that we all hear, like they're notable because they're exceptions. And like, that's not like the formula that everybody needs to follow. So, it's all really good stuff, really good advice. And, We will wrap up the episode here, though, as we always do. If you just want to share something or things that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world.
I get married this fall, so that's one.
That's a big one. Yep,
that's a big one.
You'd be in trouble if you didn't say it, probably. Yeah.
So there's that, and I'm working on Brian and I are working on this project together around a decidedly non-tech approach to learning in the workplace. And we almost deliberately try to go the opposite direction of whatever the norm is, just to challenge ourselves. And it's proving to create a really great platform for prototyping and inviting co-creation, because you can move very quickly when things are sort of like play and physical and right in front of you. And so that's something I'm really looking forward to. We want to be able to bring a lot of that play and imagination back to learning. And we'll be piloting some stuff with General Assembly. So that's super exciting for me. Again, I don't know what the future holds with that regard. I mean, I met Brian just a few months ago because we had a cold outreach from someone in higher ed that wanted to bring these tools in and train folks. And that's not what I was doing at the time. And Brian and I have started working since then, and have just been following the serendipity and following the signals. So, I just truly believe in setting yourself up to put those pathways in the world and create value for other people. So we're going to keep doing that this year and see where it takes us.
Very cool. So yeah, we'll link out to Looping Method and the work that you're doing currently, and ways for folks to connect with you, and all the other stuff that we mentioned in this episode. But I'm really excited to see what's to come, and I'm glad that we have that mutual connection there, and that we're able to chat here. It's I think a lot of good stuff for people to chew on and to think about, and I think that takeaway of just like the future of education is happening now. Like I think it's like, and it's permeating, it's just rippling out. It's like, it's influencing and changing so much. So I think people really need to be mindful of that, and just like, lifelong learning, and just rethinking, those paradigms, those formulas, and, what they believe their potential can be, and like what they, what sort of life they want to have, and those sort of things, and what kind of good they want to put out into the world. So all good vibes to end on here. So really appreciate your time, Spencer, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Dustin. I really, really enjoyed it.
This podcast is a proud member of the Connect EDU podcast network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter @ConnectEDUPod. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.